welcome to I think this is our sixth episode this year
Yeah.
of Sobremesa Chats. And I'm so excited about today's content, especially because it ties back to our last episode around values, doing some spring cleaning and identifying values and some misalignments or some patterns that are a little out of whack and how to get back on the track. So today we'll be talking about, just kind of like a deep dive into self-care, but really attuning to like how we do some self-reflection. My name is Hilda McClure. I'm the CEO of Connecta Center and an LPC, and I'm joined by Elizabeth, our San Antonio lead. And so, Elizabeth, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Elizabeth Palafox. I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in San Antonio. I'm the lead clinician for the Canenta office here. And yeah, I'm excited to go into today's conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, me too. I, last week we talked about, or last episode, we talked about um, our inventories,
Hmm.
or not our inventories, or like a value inventory, and talking about living according to our values. And, something about that, especially if some of our values are community or serving or generosity, it can get really easy for us to really serve others and focus on others and kind of lose ourselves um, around like us beyond maybe like caregivers or us beyond just like what we offer. And I think that a lot of us feel maybe even like a little bit selfish if we were to make like one of our values like self-care or prioritizing self. And
Yeah.
so today, Elizabeth has like, I love this 8 C's. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but us really doing a little bit of a deeper dive around like how do we turn that focus from others back to ourselves.
And rediscovering self.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Mhm.
yeah, connecting back to the conversation around values, again, being who we are as we're working towards goals or how we're showing up in different areas of our lives. Um, Sometimes there can be a misunderstanding or a little bit of a confusion between the roles we play and who we really are.
Mhm.
And again, because things like identity can be very rooted in the roles we fill, it's confusing sometimes, right? Who
Mhm.
am I outside of being a therapist? Who am I outside of being a partner, out
Mhm.
of being a sister, right? Like fill in the
Yeah.
blank. Um, and it can be easy to hear something about what that role should be, um, especially if we don't feel like we're living up to that shoulds, right?
Yeah.
So today we can talk about take time to talk about outside of those names or roles or identities, who are we?
Yeah.
Who is self? How can I check in with self?
Yeah.
Um,
Can I share like a short story about that?
yes, yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna try to keep it brief, but there's a lot to it. When I went to renew my license, it came up that I was missing the fingerprinting. And because I let it embarrassing, but I left it to the last minute because I didn't
All
think it
in
would
there.
be an issue. That was the problem, right? There was a gap in my licensure. And so what that means is that I can't see clients until my licensure comes back up, right? And they use a terrible what word?
Delinquent.
They
You're delinquent.
delinquent.
We've all been there.
Oh my God. Let me tell you something. I'm an Enneagram 1. If you know what
Oh.
that means. Basically, it means that I really value being good and not necessarily righteous, but like doing things the right way, right? And when that email came through that I was delinquent, woof, I had a lot. I mean, I'm so all that to say, I
Yeah.
am sobbing uncontrollably.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
right? This is just last April, sobbing uncontrollably. And it
Yeah.
was such I got on the phone with my husband, and it wasn't a big deal. I just had to go get fingerprinted. That's all
No
it
worries.
was, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I did not see clients, and there's evidence on record for that. Um, but I call my husband and I'm sobbing uncontrollably, knowing that there's a fix to this. And he goes, this is a little bit of an issue that you feel so dysregulated about this.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality was that, and he wasn't like trying to put me down. It was just like a
Right.
kind of a reflection question around
Mm-hmm.
like, have I made this being a therapist so big, like such a big part of my identity that kind of when I come up against this wall of like, yeah, my license was delinquent, I didn't get fingerprinted, it caused like so much, like literally, like I can remember thinking like what am I doing, like what am I
Right.
supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
and even like to think into the future, like I can't imagine my life not being a therapist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think it's just like well, like how do I connect back to self, because I am a therapist and there are things about being a therapist that I do inherently we carry in us, right? we're,
Mm-hmm.
we're probably naturally good listeners even outside of the therapy room,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I do give advice outside of the therapy room, but there's like some of these characteristics that are indeed a part of me. And yet I will not be a therapist for the rest of my life. And there will be things that happen. And so I don't know, it just kind of reminded me of like, wow,
Yeah.
what a good time for me to do some self-reflection work around like, who am I outside of a therapist? Because I was
Yeah.
very upset. I was very,
Oh,
very upset. Yeah. Yeah. For a
I
lot of reasons, but
oh yeah. I like I said, we've all been there. And even like outside of that, I think licensing is also just overcomplicated. Like the renewal part is overcomplicated.
it
Um,
is. It is. And
but even like
go ahead.
well, I was gonna say with like when I've worked with, well, me being first gen, but also working with first gen college students or young adults. Again, not to take up too much time, but I was first gen college student, right? And my first semester, because I was all A's like throughout middle school, high school, right? Like top of the class, always like doing the things, get to this big university, culture shock, right? Texas
Mhm.
A&M, completely different from where I grew up. I'm on academic probation my first semester there, and the way I fell into a deep depression because of that, right? Like, who am I outside of being perfect, being
Mhm.
a like a student, like a
Mhm.
perfect student? Who am I outside? If I don't graduate, everybody's expecting me. What does that say about who I am? So
Mhm.
I imagine you've all had moments like we just shared of this thing that feels catastrophic to this identity has happened. Who am I outside
Mhm.
of that? Hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Elizabeth, where do we, right? I just remember this is back when my office was still in my closet. That is, my clients who have hung out with me for some time knows that this is an upgrade. Um, I just remember there was like a couple things that came up for me. Like, right, like who am I outside of a therapist? Another reason, going back to my Enneagram oneness, another reason I was really upset was like, how did I let this slip through? And a lot of like, I should have, I did this, like, how irresponsible am I? Um, and like a lot of negative self-talk.
Hmm.
I don't think it's as bad as it used to be, but I mean, it still comes up, right? Like I'm not immune.
Hmm.
So where do we get that? Like, how do we learn to talk to ourselves like that? Like, is that something we're born with? Tell us
Hmm.
about that.
Yeah. So I think you're referring to this like foundation of our core beliefs. Some of our core beliefs may start, or our origin story of
Mhm.
where these thoughts start. And they come from so many sources, right? We have nature, then we have nurture, right? So, how are certain things presented to us, or how did we understand things about us? What stories did we believe? And so, one source may be again early commentary from people we love and trust, caregivers and environments, about what is expected of us, right? And that's going to look differently for different people. If you grew up in an environment there's a lot of gendered language, women will do this, men will do this, or it is expected, uh, if you grew up where you're the eldest, right? Eldest, there are certain expectations. If you grew up, um, like,
Like
what am
maybe
I
with like a hypercritical parent, maybe.
exactly right. You're going to perform a certain way, you're going to do things a certain way. So there's feedback. There's also feedback that's obviously like positive,
Hmm.
you're smart, you're funny,
Hmm.
you're, XYZ. So there's things you begin to believe about who I am because I'm getting a certain reaction from my environment or the people around me.
Yeah.
And our brains at that like 0 to 5, right? We're sponges. But even up until 25, right? Our brains are absorbing and molding according to what feels the safest. And so if the safest is for me to live up in this way, I'm gonna do it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so we also believe certain things based off of how we might compare to how other people are doing it, right? So maybe we hear, um, oh, so and so is, um, I mean, there's so many comparisons, like so and so, um, like bought a house, or so and so traveled here, or so and so is getting a divorce, or so and so, right? There's comparisons about how other people are treated based off of actions or decisions, and what that would mean
Hmm.
if you do it like they're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that concept of comparison actually comes from social psychology? And I don't have the terminology in front of me, but we do this thing, right? A lot of social psychology talks about like how we belong in the world.
Mhm.
And so there's like terminology about groups, being in an in group, being in an out group. And so that social comparison, sometimes we will, depending on what the need is, we will compare ourselves upward, meaning like, well, at least I'm not fill in the blank. And then in other situations, we'll compare ourselves downwards. So we'll be like, yeah, they bought a house and like we're just running so behind.
Mhm.
And so part of it is evolutionary in terms of being connected and being fit in. Um,
Mhm.
but what's like so curious, right, is just that like so much of that is all internal dialogue.
Yes.
Right. Like it's not necessarily like it's happening in like a social context where it's happening with our friends, it's happening with our parents, and yet like the impact is actually all internal. Like I'm not
Mhm.
necessarily like maybe like if I'm feeling a certain kind of way and I get a little chismosa, like maybe I'm doing this with my husband, but for the most part, the conversation is all internal, and sometimes it's like really automatic,
Mhm.
right? Like I'm down the street and I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I even get here? Like, right,
Mhm.
like I didn't get fingerprinted and now I'm the worst therapist ever. Right? Like I'm the most irresponsible woman on the planet. Or like so and Elizabeth would never let this happen to her, right?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
happens like this, right? Like I just remember getting that email about being delinquent and then sobbing uncontrollably, right? Like there was like no, so some of this because of that nature versus nurture happens like pretty automatically
Mhm.
um in our system.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yes, right. No one's waking up or going into a situation choosing to not like themselves or be disappointed in
Yeah.
themselves. It is a form of even
Hmm.
protection. And as you were talking about the evolutionary aspect of it, and we're talking about brains, right? Like our brain will adapt to what feels the safest. And if I am mean to myself and scare myself into don't ever do that again, I'm protecting future me from falling into the same trap or getting into the same sort of situation.
Hmm.
But it is a form of protection, and we'll kind of touch on it with the 8 C's and internal family systems, all these things. Um, because these are parts, like that inner critic is a part that wants to protect you. It loves you enough that it wants to keep you safe, but sometimes, oh,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I always compare the inner critic to like an overbearing, like older
Yeah,
sister, or like tough love best friend, and
yeah,
it loves you, but the way it's going about it is just
yeah,
like, please.
yeah. Camila Ramon on Peloton, she does like a lot of I think she does all of the bike rides. She's like their
Hmm.
Spanish instructor, but she calls it the tía tóxica. The tía
Mm.
tóxica, or sometimes she'll call it like it's like cucaracha energy.
The inner critic?
The inner critic, yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah, the tía tóxica.
Oh man, it is.
Mhm.
It is though.
It is, yeah. Yeah. And so sometimes like what I'll tell clients is like, can you actually vocalize who that is? Like who, I mean, I think parts so like IFS takes a little bit of a different approach, but sometimes I'll just be like, who is that? It's not you, right? Like it's not your truest self, capital S self. I just watched a video, I think it just was on Substack, and I need to be transparent. I didn't watch the whole video and I didn't read the study, but I think I got the gist of it. But the experiment was like they put a bunch of snakes with toddlers, and the toddlers are just sitting there and they're curious, but they're not that curious, but they're grabbing at them and they're playing around them and they're like just
Mm,
chilling. And it was like such a good example of like that idea of social, like nature versus nurture, right?
mhm,
When they're 15, they're not going to go sit with the snakes
mhm.
because you
Yeah.
read about how they're poisonous. Or
Mhm.
like you see a snake in the yard and mom is like, oh no, and she jumps up and
Right.
grabs you and runs in. But at 2 or 3, where you don't have that schema yet or that knowledge yet, they're literally like there's like one baby that just kind of grabs like, and I'm like, oh. Um, and so I think that like that negative self-talk, the way we talk to ourselves is right, like a lot, not all of it, but a lot of it is taught to us
Right.
through various methods.
Yeah. I mean, maybe like even it's just using the snake metaphor, right? That inner critic can't tell between like a poisonous snake and like
Hmm.
it's like a
Garden snake.
garden snake. Yeah.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that goes back to the thought of like it's protection, it's
Hmm.
adaptive.
Yeah.
And you know, it sticks around because it's been really helpful.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think that for most folks that come into my room, it's that they've been living like super self-critical. I find that it's a lot like your like mid 20s, early 30s, where you start to realize like what was once adaptive and helpful is no longer helpful. It's actually like impairing functioning. And I think a lot of us have that kind of turn where it's like, yeah, this used to work and now it's not working.
Hmm. It's not serving me anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What, so maybe you can elaborate a little bit before we get into the HCs. Like, why do we, like, like me, who I was like just kind of lost my mind when I wasn't a therapist anymore. Why do we sometimes put so much pressure on ourselves around our roles versus like who we are? Like,
Mm.
where's the overlap in that? I know that's a tricky and hard question, but here we are.
Yeah. Um, I'm sorry. Can you like repeat it back to me?
Yeah, yeah, you're fine. You're fine. Um, I just thought of something I saw today on Reddit where the person was like zoned out in their meeting, and so they pretended to like, like that their mic was broken because they called on them, and so they were like mimicking, and then the cat walked by and meowed, and they heard, and so they just left the meeting, and someone was like, next time, just
Hey,
acknowledge that
can
you
you
don't
repeat
understand. Yeah.
that? That's so funny.
Yeah. And I'm not saying you did that, but just that when you asked.
Like Yeah.
Sometimes it'd be like that, y'all. We are recording this on a Friday afternoon. So we've had a whole week.
Yeah.
Um, the question was, why do we rely so heavily on roles
Hmm.
to help us form identity?
Hmm. So again, back to this like idea of what is safest. So if my role as a therapist or as a good academic student, right? If that role has kept me safe, or it's helped me belong or feel like I belong in certain spaces, um, because, oh, you're safe in that and you belong in that, people go to you or people depend on you, or there is some type of benefit that comes from filling that role out. Um, but nobody's saying that distinction, right? Like, hi, held the person versus hi, held the therapist, right? It can become um blended. It becomes blended. And um most of our time is also taken up by these roles. If I'm gonna keep using the college example, but if my time is being taken up doing studying or doing projects, or my time was taken up applying to colleges, right? But then I got there, I met the goal. Oh shoot, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Um, so a lot of our time is spent doing the role,
Mhm.
and at times it can feel like we don't have opportunities to check in with who am I outside of that? What does that even mean? Like,
Mhm.
is that even possible? So it's just, I think, out of safety, right? We just become accustomed to being our role. I think out of convenience, that's what we're spending the most of our time doing. And then of course the feedback we're getting. The person I am when I'm a therapist may be treated differently than the person I am in
Mhm.
this difficult relationship I have.
Absolutely. Oh, that's so good. Those are so good. That's such a good examples. I think one of the things that's been like the most helpful for me um, around like making sure I don't get stuck in my role, even though I think that experience of I think it was like obviously I don't wish that on any licensed person to, like not be able to renew. I think it was a really good eye-opening moment for me to just like do that inventory around like I needed the rub to be honest, like right just to but I think one of the things that helped me a ton, I went to a Baptist university and they put a lot of emphasis on vocational ministry. And that was fine. And so vocational ministry basically was that they kind of made it seem that like it was very special for you to be called into church ministry to go work at a church. And I really struggled with that because I worked at a church actually, and but my role was not like a preaching role I ran the sports ministry. I set
Mm,
up pylons and trained referees and coach teams, right? And so while my school was telling me that ministry looks like this, I'm out here with these families doing something very, very different. And like it wasn't aligning, right? So that caused like in college, that caused a little bit of distress. And I think one of the most freeing things, I don't remember where I learned this or who talked to me about this or whatever, I can't take credit, was kind of going back to that value-based living is that if you know what your call is, you can do that in a lot of different ways. And I think for me, like my call has, I mean, I just remember it like it was the other day. I write about it in one of, I don't know if it was this book or something else. I wrote about it where I knew like there was like this magazine I was reading in sixth grade. I was in sixth grade. I was like 12 or 13 and there was a section in this magazine I was reading around like this program that was helping provide economic mobility for women and children.
mm,
And something just like clicked in me that I was
mm.
like, this is the work I want to be doing.
Yeah.
Um, and so kind of growing up and moving in, like understanding that like my part of my purpose in the world is to serve women and children. And I think you can see that through my career, but that I can do that in a lot of different ways. That if I couldn't be a therapist tomorrow, that doesn't take away from my purpose. It's just like rediscovering like what that could look like.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a value for me versus like that's the only role I can play as a therapist.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
And that's hard. Like that, I feel really fortunate that I have like right like at 12, I was like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. Yeah. But I know that that's
Found
like not
it.
yeah, found it. But even that, like I may have found that purpose, but it took me a long time to really figure out what that looked like, right? Like I went
Right.
to school to become I started as a psych major, then I became an education major and I worked at a church and then I quit and then I went to a nonprofit and then I went back, right? Like it was a long journey to get like
Yeah.
here,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in my
Mm-hmm.
mid 30s now and I feel like I'm just starting to settle in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I can't remember where I was going with that. But yeah, sometimes like moving, right? Like that from like my identity is only based on a role, but rather like my identity is based on one just being like I'm just a human
Mm-hmm.
being, not a human doing, but two like understanding like what my values are and that like who I want to show up with could show up in a role, but it can also show up in like I don't know, like I just want like I have a girlfriend coming over tonight and we're just gonna sit and watch this thing and that can be of service too.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so freeing to like exist outside of that role.
Hmm.
Like I'm enough as I am. And that
Yeah.
can be really freeing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, do you want to take us into the 8 C's and tell us what that is and kind of how that helps us?
Yeah, so again, what if you don't don't feel like you've had the time or really thought about who am I when I'm not doing my job or I'm not caregiving or I'm not leading, right? Who am I? And so with internal family systems, which is a framework that approaches it has this approach of kind of like with family therapy, we have different family members, right? And they all have a function.
Mhm,
Sometimes they blend together. Right? People are in each other's business. Sometimes people
mhm,
are overprotective. Sometimes people don't want anything to do with it. And similarly, internal family systems, it has this idea we have an internal family operating kind of like inside out. It's like the
mhm.
best example I can
Yeah.
give, where we have this little committee, and everybody has their different personality, a different opinion.
Mhm.
Um, they are all protective. Again, like Inside Out, if you've seen that movie, all those feelings are protective of Riley, the girl, but sometimes they don't let her make decisions for herself.
Yeah.
And internal family systems also talks about knowing self, capital S self, through the 8 C's. So I'm gonna share this wheel.
Hmm.
And again, we don't have to go through all of them and we can share it at a later time, but just to get an idea of if you have that question of like, well, how do I know when I'm operating from capital
Hmm.
S self? These would be a good starting point. Calm, courage, curiosity, clarity, compassion, creativity, confidence, and connectedness. Who are you, or think of times when you've been let's say creative, like in your creative era,
Hmm.
and how you may have felt. And creativity doesn't have to look like art. It can look
Hmm.
like I'm making a recipe that I love. It can be I'm redecorating my room. It can be, so many things.
Hmm.
But when I was being creative, I was using that part of my brain. I was making something. How did that feel for me? What was I doing when that was happening?
Hmm.
And, chances are capital S self was present.
Hmm.
Um, you know, when I've been, when was the last time I was very clear about a decision I wanted to make or a a project I had in mind, a calling, you mentioned calling, like when was the last time I was very clear on the path I wanted to take? What were the factors in that situation? What was the situation about? And how did I feel? Again, you were operating from capital S self. And so we can go through all of these and ask that same question. When did I feel this? When was I engaged with this part?
Mhm.
How can I bring that into right now? How can I reconnect with these parts?
Mhm. Yeah.
There is a book called the the Artist's Way. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
heard of
Hmm.
it.
Yep. Yep.
And that one I'm on it, but I really love it because it forces you, invites you, I'll say, it
Hmm.
invites you to be creative every day. Like find ways to be creative. And the way it opens you up to not just like, again, art or like writing or like putting a collage together, but presence, right? How am I more
Mm.
present in my relationships, present with myself, um, energized when and where and
Mhm.
how? Um, so again, this is a starting point
Mhm.
of if I want to reconnect with self, which one of these can I pick?
Yeah.
Which of these can I work on embodying
Hmm.
and reflecting on?
Yeah. I love that. I think to kind of summarize this, because we are coming to the end of today's episode, but um, to think about self as like the most regulated, best version of yourself. Now, we can't always live there, right?
Mhm,
Because the different
mhm,
parts they play their role,
mhm.
right? I don't necessarily want to be regulated if someone's coming at me.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like if someone is like charging me like,
I'm not going to
oh,
be calm.
please, yeah, please don't do that. Like, right, like that's doesn't right.
Hmm.
But it means that when I'm going into situations, um I can really like take all the information that's given to me, my emotional information, the factual information of what's happening in front of me, my different like regulation states, and take all that information and then make a sound decision. In DBT, we talk about the wise mind,
Mm,
right? That our mind and bodies have wisdom. And so we're trying to operate out of that place.
yeah.
Um, and so it is us being able to take a step back and not be, when we're not reactive, but responsive.
Mm, hmm.
Right. And so and so these are great ways to start that. Right. So, and you practice it just like the values, right? Like we practice it. How do I practice calmness? How do I practice courage? How do I practice clarity? Um, and you're not going to nail it all the time.
Hmm.
Right. Like I love this list and I can tell you right now that I don't always, I
Yeah.
sometimes three. I think three. I can get to three at the same time. Maybe four on a good day.
And it's a good exercise in revealing like how many of these answers have like are still kind of blended with your role.
Hmm.
And it can challenge you to say, well, outside of that role, right?
Hmm.
When am I these things? So you
Hmm.
can have these in your role, but also where else, how
Yeah.
else?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like, how do you show up for your life?
Hmm.
Right? Like our roles are one part, but I think if we zoom out, like how do I show up with courage in my life? That can be in my role, but that can also be like how I show up as a partner, how I show up even with myself, like to try
Yeah.
new things. Or I think I talked about this before, but I did the MS 150 in San Antonio in October,
Oh.
and it was like my first dude. I've trained inside on my bike, like my Peloton's right there. Like I've trained for like 8, 9 weeks on my bike, and then the week of the race, I got on a like an outdoor bike and I ran across. I like did it across the street, and I just practiced. So I had like maybe 20 minutes bike time before this ride. And then I go to this ride. I'm like, okay, I hope I'm ready. And but there was like I just remember it so clearly. We were about halfway through the ride and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. I'm doing
Mhm.
this thing that I never thought I would ever be capable. Oh my gosh, it's making me teary-eyed. But like
Yes.
I think
Oh,
it's like
yes.
how do I want to be like courageous in my life. Like I and
Hmm.
so what can that like I like connecting with that capital S self, how can I do that? How can I be that? How can I be calm in my life when everything feels like it's topsy-turvy? How do I connect with like myself
Yeah.
and be calm and same thing with compassion. And it's something you have to practice, right? And I think
Mhm.
like from that experience with the bike, like wow, I feel like it almost like plants more courage,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like
It's energy you can refer back to, almost like in moments where I'm not feeling courageous or I'm not feeling strong, can I reconnect with that feeling of, like being that powerful,
yeah,
and how your that mind body connection is so strong that you do feel that.
yeah,
And it's still, again, like, not to serve your role solely, but again, how much you can gain from really being in those moments of capital S self.
yeah. I love that. I think we probably need to do another episode on this.
It's such a good one.
It's
It's
such
a
a
good
good one.
one.
It's a
I
good
could
one.
talk on and on.
All day, all day. I also just want to, before we wrap up, I want to acknowledge that so much of this work is about self-reflection work, and there is a fine line around that.
Mhm.
So you don't want to self-reflect too much. If you're not self-reflecting at all, a little bit is going to feel like a lot, but we also don't want to live in our heads. We want to live in our lives.
Mhm.
So we do a little journaling, and then we go to work and we hang out with our folks. And then tomorrow we do a little more journaling, and right, not for us to get too stuck. And I think like I get in trouble with that because I think about a lot of stuff like just naturally. And so just a reminder that this is just bite size, right? We're doing a little bit of work. That's why therapy is only once a week for 50 minutes. You can't self reflect too much.
And people, it's
Uh,
bi-weekly because of that. I need a week of practice.
Yep,
Mhm.
yep. And so it's change requires a lot of thinking before we do doing, and so we spread that out, right?
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much for joining us, and what a inspiring episode today. Just I feel really encouraged and just reminded of like as humans, like what we're capable when we connect to that capital S self.
Yeah.
Um, Elizabeth, thank you so much for bringing that to us today. If you guys are needing counseling services, still available. Yep. You
This
can,
beautiful bright yellow couch, that could be yours.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. If you're virtual, you could witness this beautiful purple wall. And if you're lucky, you might get a Kia sighting. Like you might get Kia show up in your free my dog.
Aw.
She's snoring away right now, but you can check us out at connectcenter.com. We take all major insurances, and maybe if you're in a different financial spot and need a bilingual counselor, you can check out connectafoundation.org, where we have reduced cost sessions. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one.